History is full of surprises. We all know about great wars, famous rulers, and world-changing inventions. But what about the strangest, most forgotten stories, the ones that never made it into the textbooks? What if I told you that a failed assassination attempt led to the invention of the croissant? That a scientist once hypnotized an entire town? Or that one man saved over 1,000 lives by pretending to be drunk? Stay with me as we uncover some of the most bizarre, unknown, and mind-blowing moments in history that will change the way you see the past. The time a French queen's breakfast saved her life. In 1683, the Ottoman Empire was besieging Vienna, threatening to conquer the city. Inside the city walls, a group of bakers working before dawn heard strange sounds beneath the streets. It turned out to be Ottoman soldiers digging tunnels to invade. The bakers raised the alarm, the attack was stopped, and Vienna was saved. To celebrate, they created a new pastry in the shape of the Ottoman crescent, what we now call the croissant. But here's the twist. When this pastry arrived in France, Queen Marie Antoinette loved it so much that it became her favorite breakfast. Years later, during the French Revolution, her habit of waking up late for croissants delayed her escape from Paris. She was caught, and the rest is history. The lesson? Never let breakfast decide your fate. The scientist who accidentally hypnotized an entire town. In 1784, a scientist named Franz Mesmer was obsessed with a strange theory that an invisible force called animal magnetism could be used to heal people. He began performing mass hypnosis experiments in Paris, using music, flickering candles, and long rods to put people into a trance. At one of these bizarre public events, dozens of people collapsed into a hypnotic state at the same time. Witnesses panicked, believing the devil was at work. The French government was so disturbed by Mesmer's experiments that they assembled a panel of experts, including Benjamin Franklin, to investigate. Their conclusion? Mesmer was a fraud, but his work inspired future studies of hypnosis, and even today, mesmerizing comes from his name. But let's be honest, accidentally hypnotizing an entire town is still one of the wildest things a scientist has ever done. The Japanese businessman who survived both atomic bombs. Imagine waking up one morning, surviving a nuclear explosion, and thinking your worst day is over, only to experience another atomic bomb 3 days later. That's exactly what happened to Tsutomu Yamaguchi, a Japanese engineer working in Hiroshima on August 6, 1945. He was on his way to work when the first atomic bomb detonated, leaving him severely burned but alive. Desperate to escape, he boarded a train to Nagasaki, only to witness the second atomic bomb explode right in front of him on August 9. Yet, incredibly, he survived both blasts and went on to live until 2010, becoming one of the few officially recognized double atomic bomb survivors in history. His story remains one of the most astonishing cases of survival ever recorded. The drunk man who saved over 1,000 people. During World War II, a Japanese diplomat in Lithuania pulled off one of the most daring rescues in history by pretending to be drunk. His name was Chin Sugihara, and he was stationed in Lithuania when Jewish refugees began arriving, desperate for visas to escape Nazi-occupied Europe. Tokyo had ordered him not to help, but Sugihara ignored orders and started issuing thousands of illegal visas. When Nazi and Soviet officials questioned him about the growing number of Jewish refugees escaping, he pretended to be a useless drunk, slurring his speech and playing dumb to avoid suspicion. It worked. By the time the Nazis realized what had happened, Sugihara had already saved over 6,000 Jewish refugees. He was later called the Japanese Schindler, but his story remains far less known than it should be. The Roman emperor who fought a giraffe in the Colosseum. Roman emperors were known for their insane stunts, but few were as ridiculous as Emperor Caracalla's decision to fight a giraffe in the Colosseum. Caracalla, who ruled from 211 to 217 AD, was obsessed with proving his strength. He had already executed his own brother, wiped out rival senators, and declared himself the new Alexander the Great. But when that wasn't enough, he came up with a new idea, a heroic battle against a giraffe. The poor animal, confused and terrified, was forced into the arena, where Caracalla chased it around with a spear in front of thousands of spectators. It wasn't even a fight, just a brutal display of ego. The Romans, unimpressed, mocked him for fighting an animal that didn't even fight back. His reign ended in disgrace when his own guards assassinated him. the Library of Alexandria didn't burn the way you think. We've all heard the tragic tale of the Library of Alexandria, the greatest collection of knowledge in the ancient world, supposedly destroyed in one catastrophic fire. But here's the truth. The Library of Alexandria didn't burn down in a single night. It was destroyed gradually over centuries. Julius Caesar accidentally set fire to part of it in 48 BCE while besieging the city, but most of the books survived. Later, during the rise of Christianity and the fall of the Roman Empire, new rulers defunded the library and let it fall into ruin. By the time of the Arab conquest in the 7th century, most of its knowledge was already lost, not in one tragic fire, but through decades of neglect. This means the real tragedy wasn't destruction, but indifference. The world didn't lose the Library of Alexandria overnight. It simply stopped caring. Napoleon's army was defeated by bunnies. Napoleon Bonaparte was one of the greatest military strategists in history, but there was one enemy he couldn't defeat: rabbits. One day, he ordered a massive rabbit hunt for his officers. His men gathered hundreds of rabbits and released them all at once. But instead of fleeing, the rabbits charged straight at Napoleon and his men. The reason? The rabbits had been raised in captivity and thought Napoleon was there to feed them. The attack got so overwhelming that Napoleon retreated, one of the few times he ever did. A woman was hit by a meteorite and survived. In 1954, and Hodges from Alabama became the only confirmed person in history to be struck by a meteorite and lived to tell the tale. The space rock crashed through her roof, bounced off her radio, and hit her in the side, leaving a giant bruise. The chances of this happening? 1 in several billion. The CIA once tried to spy on the Kremlin with cats. In the 1960s, the CIA spent millions developing a program called Acoustic Kitty. They implanted microphones and antennas inside cats, hoping they could eavesdrop on Soviet officials. The first mission? The cat was released near a Soviet compound in Washington, D.C., but was immediately hit by a taxi and killed. The project was scrapped soon after. A doctor once used a hole in a man's stomach for science. In the 1820s, Dr. William Beaumont treated a soldier who survived a gunshot wound to the stomach, but the wound never fully closed. Instead of sealing it, Beaumont used the hole to observe digestion in real time, sticking in food on a string and watching it break down. His research changed our understanding of the human digestive system. Hitler's nephew fought against him in World War II. Adolf Hitler's own nephew, William Patrick Hitler, despised his uncle so much that he fled Germany, moved to America, and joined the U.S. Navy. He fought against Nazi Germany in World War II and later changed his last name to hide the connection. A medieval pope held a trial against a dead man. In 897 AD, Pope Stephen VI ordered the corpse of his predecessor, Pope Formosus, to be dug up and put on trial. The dead pope was found guilty. His corpse was stripped of its robes, mutilated, and thrown into the Tiber River. This bizarre event became known as the Cadaver Synod. The U.S. once planned to nuke the moon. During the Cold War, the U.S. military considered dropping a nuclear bomb on the moon to intimidate the Soviet Union. Thankfully, the plan was scrapped. But just imagine if they had gone through with it. A man escaped Alcatraz using a raft made of raincoats. Frank Morris and 2 other inmates escaped Alcatraz in 1962 using a homemade raft made from 50 stolen raincoats. To this day, they have never been found. The first submarine attack in history failed because of human error. During the American Revolution, the Turtle, the first military submarine, was sent to attack a British warship. The problem? The pilot couldn't figure out how to attach the explosives. After failing, he simply floated away. The Soviets once built a doomsday machine. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union developed the Dead Hand system, a real-life doomsday machine that could launch nuclear missiles automatically if Russian leaders were killed. It still exists today. The Spanish flu got its name because Spain told the truth. The 1918 flu pandemic wasn't actually from Spain. But because Spain was neutral in World War I, it was the only country to report on the outbreak. Other nations had outbreaks, but censored the news. The drunken Soviet tank incident that almost started World War III. It was the height of the Cold War, and tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union were at an all-time high. The world lived in fear of nuclear war. But what nearly triggered an actual conflict? A tank and vodka. In 1968, Soviet troops were stationed in Czechoslovakia following the Prague Spring. Bored and restless, a group of Soviet soldiers got heavily drunk one night and decided to steal a tank for fun. They took the massive vehicle for a joyride through the city, smashing into buildings and terrifying civilians. At first, Czech citizens thought it was an actual invasion. Reports reached NATO, who scrambled their intelligence teams, fearing this was the beginning of an attack on Western Europe. It took hours before Soviet officials calmed the situation and assured the world it was just a minor disciplinary issue. But for a brief moment, a few drunk soldiers nearly ignited World War III. The pirate queen who commanded a fleet of 80,000 men. When you think of history's most feared pirates, you might picture Blackbeard or Captain Kidd, but none of them came close to the power and dominance of Qing Shi, a woman who ruled the South China Sea in the early 1800s. Originally a prostitute, Qing Shi married a pirate leader and quickly took control of his fleet after his death. But instead of waging small raids, she built a naval empire, commanding 80,000 pirates and 1,800 ships. That's more than the entire Spanish Armada at its peak. Even the Chinese Navy, British forces, and Portuguese warships couldn't defeat her. Eventually, China offered her a deal, full amnesty in exchange for retiring peacefully. She accepted, lived the rest of her life in luxury, and died of old age, one of the few pirates in history to do so. The lost nuclear bomb still sitting off the coast of Georgia. In 1958, during the height of Cold War tensions, the United States Air Force accidentally dropped a nuclear bomb off the coast of Georgia. And guess what? It's still there. A B-47 bomber carrying a 7,600-pound Mark 15 hydrogen bomb collided with another aircraft during a training mission. To avoid an explosion, the crew ejected the bomb into the water near Tybee Island. Despite multiple searches, the bomb was never recovered. The U.S. government insists it poses no immediate danger, but many experts disagree. To this day, a fully armed nuclear bomb remains lost beneath the ocean. The CIA's secret plan to use a dead body to trick the Nazis. During World War II, Operation Mincemeat was one of the most bizarre and brilliant deception strategies ever executed. The British needed to trick Nazi Germany into believing the Allies would invade Greece instead of Sicily. Their solution? A dead body, fake documents, and an elaborate cover story. British intelligence obtained the corpse of a homeless man, dressed him in a British officer's uniform, and filled his pockets with fake documents indicating an invasion in Greece. The body was then dropped off the coast of Spain, where it washed up and was discovered by German spies. The deception worked. Hitler redirected troops to Greece, leaving Sicily underdefended and allowing the Allies to successfully invade. A war-changing strategy based entirely on a corpse. The great escaped zoo bear who became a war hero. During World War II, a group of Polish soldiers adopted an orphan bear cub and named him Wojciech. At first, he was just a mascot, but as he grew, Wojciech became a fully enlisted soldier in the Polish army. He helped carry artillery shells, wrestled with soldiers for fun, and even saluted when commanded. But the most insane part? He fought in the Battle of Monte Cassino in 1944. After the war, Wojciech retired to a zoo in Scotland, where he lived out the rest of his life as a national hero. The time America banned sliced bread, and people freaked out. In 1943, during World War II, the U.S. government banned sliced bread to conserve resources for the war effort. The result? Absolute chaos. Newspapers published letters from outraged citizens, and one housewife even wrote that the ban was worse than Pearl Harbor. The backlash was so intense that the government reversed the ban within weeks. History isn't just about wars and kings. It's full of insane, forgotten, and unbelievable stories. Which of these facts blew your mind the most? And do you know any other hidden historical gems? Let us know in the comments. If you love mind-blowing history, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the past. Until next time, remember, the weirdest stories are often the ones history tried to forget.